It is now my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Freeman Hrabowski. Dr. Hrabowski is the president of the University of Maryland in Baltimore County. His accomplishments are notable and include being named by President Obama to the chair of the President's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for African Americans. In 2008, he was recognized as one of America's best leaders by U.S. News and World Report. He served as the chair of the National Academy's committee that produced the report Expanding Underrepresented Minority Participation, America's Science and Technology Talent at the Crossroads in 2011. In 2012, Dr. Hrabowski was named one of the top 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine. Additionally, in 2013, he presented a TED Talk titled 4 Pillars of College Success in Science. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Freeman Hrabowski.
William Carlos Williams once said that it's difficult to find news in poetry, and yet men die miserably every day because of a lack of what is found there. And so I begin with the words of our beloved and now late Maya Angelou, who looked into the face of America decades ago, before any of the achievers were born, at the installation of another president, and said, "Lift up your eyes upon this day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men, take it, this dream, into the palms of your hands. Mold it into the image of your most public self. Sculpt it into the shape of your most private need. Here on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face and say simply, very simply with hope, good morning. Good morning to Washington, D.C. Give her a hand for poetry, for poetry. I am delighted to be here. I have two of my colleagues, and I'm really proud of them, the presidents of Trinity and Georgetown, and we always recognize each other, so Sister Pat and Brother Jack, give them a hand for being here and caring so deeply, so deeply. I'm really proud of them. That's wonderful. It's just wonderful. I walked in this morning, and a young man I had seen in grad school when he was out at Michigan is now on the staff here, and I said, Herb, about your staff, not bad. And young man, and I'm very proud of him, Ryan McBride. Why are you giving him a hand? I mean, the idea, young black men who are professionals. It's wonderful. And then people were worried I wasn't going to get here because I was out talking to two of the achievers, Jadir. He taught me to say that name, Jadir and Erica. And we were talking about why they were here, why they were proud to be these achievers. We even did a math problem that I will give you in just a minute. But what they said that was so significant was that somehow they were frustrated at one point for being around people who didn't seem to care about what their future would have. And they wanted a chance to be around people who wanted to go somewhere, who wanted to do something with their lives. And they kept using the name Christine. They kept saying, and Christine said this, and Christine said that. And I said, well, why does this Christine, this staff member, do what she does? What do you think? And they said, she really cares. She really cares. So wherever Christine is, if you're here, give her a round of applause if she's here anywhere. It was amazing. And now I'm going to give you a math problem because I get goosebumps doing math. How many of you love math? Let me see your hands in the room. It's not bad. I'm on a campus, UMBC, kids from 150 countries where math rocks. We like to say that we are true mega nerds. And you saw the Big Ten group next door. Well, I like to say my basketball team can read well. Give me a big round of applause for that. Can read well, and they graduate, and they get good jobs. I'm very proud of that. The problem says 29 children are in a class. 20 have dogs, 15 have cats. How many have both a dog and a cat? I'll say it again. 29 children are in a class. 20 have dogs, 15 have cats. How many have both a dog and a cat? Now, you might think it's a simple problem. It is a 6th grade problem. And young people, I actually wrote the questions for the math SAT for years, all right? But I will tell you that many teachers cannot get it at first. Many of the business leaders here cannot get it at first. It takes time. But if you can get it before I walk out that door, I'll give you $50. Now, notice their faces and how all of a sudden they start listening to that problem. Incentives matter. Incentives matter. They were business leaders. You know that. Give me a hand for incentives. You got to have incentives. It's important. And then, Yolanda and Herb, I want to congratulate you. Some of you still may not appreciate the idea that half the students who come through this program, go to college, actually graduate. But what you need to know is that in America, students from the bottom quarter economically of our society right now have under a 10%, for any race, under a 10% chance of graduating. You know, and when you can say that young people who've not had every advantage, from Tyrone to the wonderful students in the video, have had all kinds of challenges to overcome and obstacles, and yet they kept moving. That notion that we fall down, but we get up. And they kept going, and they graduated. Give the notion of half and more graduating from college. Give it a big round of applause, because we want even more. We want even more, but it is a big deal that that has happened. The book, my most recent book, is entitled Holding Fast to Dreams, and it's subtitled Empowering Young People from the Civil Rights Movement to STEM Achievement. I am of the Deep South. You know, I'm from Baltimore. I like to say Baltimore is the Upper South. Upper South. One day we think like Philadelphia, the next day like Richmond, but I grew up in the Deep South, Birmingham. And in the Deep South, we love stories. Now, if I gave you a math theory, you'd go to sleep. But if I give you a story, you'll think about it. And I've told these stories so many times about my mother growing up in a little country town, Wetumpka, and working as a child maid, and the woman being kind enough to say, read, go in the library and read when you finish, and then talking with her about the books, as Jadea and Erica and I talked about books this morning. And amazingly, she said her girlfriends would get upset because she started loving to read. The more she read, the better a reader she became. And the better a reader she became, the more she enjoyed the experience, and it just went on from there. But her girlfriends tended not to read unless they had to. And it was a painful experience because they never learned to read well. As a math professor of over 40 years, I will tell you, first of all, if you teach a child to read, you can never take it from her, number one. And number two, anybody who learns to read begins to enjoy the experience. And number three, if you want to teach a child to solve math problems on the SAT or in life, teach them to read and to be able to think critically. And then I can take the words in a word problem, young people, and look at the relationships among the words and then translate into syllables, into symbols, and then I can solve the problem. And so at the heart of the work that we do in education will be reading and thinking skills. At the heart of the work you do in the business community will be good thinking skills and having to dream about what you're trying to accomplish, and then having the values necessary, the hard work, the persistence. You know, on my campus, we have something called True Grit, and he is our mascot. It is a dog, a statue, True Grit. And we say that UMBC is the house of grit. You see, in America, we tend to tell kids you're either smart or you're not, or you're good in math or you're not. But as my friend Carol Dweck at Stanford would say, or as Angela Duckworth at Penn would say, it is not about somebody being smart or not. No, we have to get out of that notion. It is about mindset. It is about grit. It is about understanding that anybody who succeeds learns to work as hard as possible. You know, when I asked the young people how hard they were working, one said maybe studying at night. One said about 4 hours, 4 to 5. The other said 2. They're both doing well, but the one who was doing the 4 to 5 was doing better. Give them a hand for studying at night, for doing homework and studying at night. And the second story I tell has to do with being in the back of church, and I'm not wanting to be there, and my parents insisted that I come and listen to this guy talk. And the guy says, if the children participate in this peaceful protest, all of America will understand that even our babies know the difference between right and wrong, and then they'll be able to go to better schools. And while I had some good teachers, we didn't have the resources, and I was tired, young people, of getting the hand-me-down books from the white schools. After they finished, they'd give them to us. And even when my parents wanted to buy my books, they couldn't because people didn't want me to be different. So I had to use those torn-up books. And psychologically, you can imagine what happens to a child who believes he only gets the book after another group has used them for years. And so when this guy said, if they participate, they can go to better schools. And I said, who is that guy? And his name was Dr. Martin King. And I had the privilege, I went home and I said to my parents, I've got to go. I've got to go. And they said, absolutely not. All right? To which they said, because if you go, you're going to go to jail, and you're only 12 years old. All right? And I said, you know, you guys made me go. I did not want to go. Who wants to be in church in the middle of the week? And then I did listen. I was eating my M&Ms and doing my math, but I did listen to him. And he asked us to go. I said, you guys are hypocrites. Students, at that time, you did not tell your parents, your daddy especially, that they were hypocrites, all right? Go to your room. But the next morning they came in and they said, it wasn't that we didn't trust you. We did not trust how you'd be treated. But if you want to go, we'll put you in God's hands. And so I did go, and I did spend an awful week in jail. But the experience taught me that even children, it was an awful week. This was a week when Birmingham put its children in jail for simply marching because they wanted a better education. This is the good and the bad and the ugly of our country, our wonderful country. And yet somehow we learned that, in the words of Thoreau and civil disobedience, that we as Americans have the right to speak up when there is an injustice done. Give us a hand for those children who went to jail to help with that. It was powerful, powerful. And in the middle of the week, our parents outside and the little kids are crying. And Dr. King said, what you do this day as children will have an impact on children who've not been born. And then that led to many other marches and to the civil rights legislation, the voting rights legislation, higher education legislation. And if it were not for all of that, we could not sit here today from different backgrounds. So, and believe it or not, all of us have profited. Give the civil rights movement a round of applause for what it did for America, for America. And what most of you don't know is that fewer people had gone to college in the mid-'60s than you think. What percent of Americans do you think had a college education in 1965, who had earned a college degree? What do you think? Don't be risk adverse. Let me hear it. 30. It was only 10%. Only 10% of Americans. At that time, we broke everything down into black and white. We didn't talk about other groups, just black and white. What percent of whites had a college degree? You think a lot of white people, don't you? That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. It was only 11% of whites had a college degree. You know, we're talking about 47% today. 11% had gotten a college degree. What percent of blacks? Between 2 and 3%, and mostly from historically black institutions. And so you put it together and you've got 10%. So 90% of Americans did not have a college degree. And Americans of all races didn't think their kids were going to go to college. Why? Because they didn't have the money. And the one thing that had convinced America that maybe regular people could go to college was something called the GI Bill that some of you have heard about back in the 40s. What group do you think fought the GI Bill when they said, let the veterans go to college? What group do you think fought that? College presidents. From the president of Harvard to the president of Chicago, not because they were bad people, but they did not think, they said, if you put those veterans in our colleges, they will become academic hobo jungles. Because that was the mindset of people who thought that only wealthy people should go to college back in the 40s. But those veterans went, and within 2 years, we had almost 2 million Americans, veterans of all races, heavily white guys, but of all races, men and women, who went and did well because they had the discipline and the mindset, and they were doing it for their families. And all of a sudden, America realized that some regular people could go to college. So in the 60s, when the Higher Education Act passed, and all of a sudden there was money for people who were not from wealth to help them with Pell Grants and other financial aid, people started sending their kids to college. And we went from that 10% in the 60s to what percent today? What percent of today of college, of Americans have a college degree? 40, anybody else? 30. It's only about 31%. What percent of whites? They heard that 75 again. It's only about 37% of whites. What percent of blacks? About 20%. What percent? What's the fastest growing group in our country? Hispanic, Latino, right? What percent? It's only 14%. All right. What percent of Asians? Asian Americans? I always get a 90 from somebody. It's okay. It's okay. It is 55% because many students are the children of people who came here to grad school, and they do quite well. 25% of my students are of Asian descent, and we have students from 150 countries. But and then Native Americans are way below everybody else. And so when I put it together, 2/3 of Americans today still come from families where no one graduated from college. Now let me ask this question to the whole room. How many of you, because Tyrone said this, how many of you in this room are either the first to go to college or first generation to go to college? Let me see your hands. Give them all a round of applause, of all ages. And there is my point, that it is an inspiring story in America that the first person goes to college and others watch to see what's going to happen. The young woman, young guy goes, and at church, when they mention he's going to college, some people are, here, child, here, honey, here's $1. They'll give you $1, $5 just to help you out. Other people going, you know, she needs to be getting a job. You know, you got the naysayers, right? You know, but somehow you go ahead, you do it, and you succeed. And when you do it, then your other younger brothers and sisters, they say, I want to be like her. I want to be like him. And all of a sudden, they do it and they get jobs, and it's an amazing story. It really is. It is how America has become such a large middle class. What is my point? Those of us who've done well, the business community, the college presidents and others, would say of those to whom much is given, much is required. And there's my point about partnerships. I mean, this foundation, this College Success Foundation, is one of the few examples in America of a major initiative that works, that is showing that relationships make the difference. When the students that I met this morning, Jadir and Erica, could talk about Christine and tell me that when they get off track, she's there for them. When they can talk about getting together with other people with the similar goals of making it. You know, it's the same initiative on my own campus. We have partnerships with Northrop Grumman when they work with us with Lakeland Elementary in Baltimore City, and we have a STEAM center there. And they're giving us millions of dollars to work with these children pre-K through 8. It's really important to look at the birth to pre-K period first. Give me a hand for early childhood education. It's very important. And to have engineers of all races, men and women, coming over, working with my students and faculty in initiatives on solving math problems and understanding how the math, how the science, even how the arts, how they all STEAM somehow come together to help people do the job at Northrop Grumman. And then to see them working with us to produce these cyber scholars, since cybersecurity is so important, and to think about the fact that we need more women and people of color, of all races, who are good in computer science. And the notion of the corporate community being an example of excellence for this country is a very special idea, that we encourage people to get a degree so they can go into that community or into the not-for-profit world and make a difference in the lives of other people. And the idea of supporting an initiative that works, of saying we like the idea that you evaluate, is very important. You know, many people around the country in different organizations are proud to say 90% going to college, 95% going to college. But as a college president, both Pat and Jack and I would say this: it's great that they go on, but do they succeed? Because the biggest problem we have is that so many go and they do not succeed. They can't get back up and stand up and speak like flawless Tyrone. Give him another round of applause. And the other young people who finished with videos. How many of you in this room are between 35 and, between 35 and 70? Let me see your hands. All right, I got good news and bad. Which one you want first? Bad news is you're getting old. Get over it. It's okay. I'm over 60. It's okay. The good news is, though, if you're an American, you are the best educated number 2 in the world. That's how well we have done. The world has been inspired by us. But watch this. How many of you in the room are between 25 and 34? And look how they're so proud. Look at them. They're so proud. They say, we're not old like the rest of y'all, right? All right? I got good news and bad. Which one you want first? Bad news is you're not quite as good as we are. You're not as high achieving as we are. All right? No offense. Just kidding. Kinda. All right? Fact is, you all are number 12 in the world. In other words, that generation between 25 and 34, yeah, large numbers went to college, but they never made it. They never succeeded. What this foundation is doing, and as Herb and I talked, that's so significant, is that they get the point. It's not enough to get them out of high school, to graduate them from high school. Number one, you want to make sure they can read and think and have discipline. But number two, you want to follow them and have that, be that partner and that coach in college. Because as much as it would, give me a hand for the idea of continuing to support students in college. I've got a parent here this morning who told me a wonderful story about the academics of a student on my campus, but that her daughter was not having the best experience residentially. There were some challenges. And she said, I'm not trying to come to you about this stuff, but I wanted to hear it because we always, on any campus, have challenges. And the worst thing a company or a university can do is to not want to hear the problems. You've got to be willing to listen to the challenges and the problems to make the place better. Because unlike Tyrone, we are not flawless. You get that point? We are not. And here's the point, that universities, and I know, for example, that Pat can appreciate this, universities have not been accustomed to taking in large numbers of kids who are first-generation Americans who are different from most people and helping them succeed. And we tend, when the student doesn't succeed, across American higher education, to say it's the student's fault. We rarely look in the mirror and say, what did we not do well? You know, what you do in companies with customers, even when they're difficult, is to figure out what the deal is so you can help them out, yeah, so they can have their needs met and so you can get that money, of course. It makes sense. Well, look at this. I say to my fellow college presidents, where we are talking about under half usually finishing college, suppose we were hospitals. Suppose the idea was you go into a hospital, you got a 40% chance of living, getting out of there alive. Everybody would be upset. So for universities, we are saying, in the enlightened places, we have to do a better job, where we need the help of the College Success Foundation and others who support us, who tell us when we're not doing the right thing, who help us culturally, and who help to push students to do the right thing. And so companies working in collaboration with this community, with this foundation, can make all the difference in the world. You know, we have a program for first-time offenders on my campus from inner city Baltimore. My campus is adjacent to the BWI airport, and it would be very easy for us to be out in that pastoral setting with 600 acres and be satisfied. But we understand that our future is tied to DC and Baltimore, that you cannot live in that bubble, because people will be coming everywhere, and our children and grandchildren will have to interact with all kinds of people. And the better educated a society, the more enlightened it will be. But this program has been in place through our Shriver Center since 1989. Since 1980, the same amount of years that president over here, give her a hand, Pat, has been president of Trinity until 1989. And here is my point. Until last year, we had never lost a child. These are kids, we take them in, and we work with them for over a year sometimes, year and a half, and the state gives us money for juvenile services because we keep them out of jail. And here's the point. We bring them on campus in the evenings. We work with them 24 hours a day. Until last year, we had never lost a child. This past year, we lost 5 children. I said that one place, and they said, what happened? Where'd they go? I said, they were killed between the ages of 14 and 17. In 4 of the 5 cases, the children got out of their houses after midnight. And who's safe after midnight? Nobody, all right? And so we are now understanding the need to make sure they stay at home with that grandmama, that mama, whoever it is, the parents. And the key is this, that we understand the importance of connecting to the city schools, not because large numbers even will come to us, but because we want to get them somewhere. We want to help them to get jobs, whether it is in a community college or a 4-year institution, because that will make the difference. And that's the beauty of this foundation, is that they understand that the only way young people will succeed is by getting the entire community, having a city council president here, and college presidents, and the business community. Washington, D.C. is reflective of our country. It is considered the best. It is the most powerful city politically in the world. And people look to see what is happening here. And they will look at those who are among the least of them, because the measure of a society really does focus on how those who are privileged work to pull along and elevate those who don't have those advantages. There is the essence of a society. And I would argue, as goes Washington, so will go America. And so you have a special responsibility when I say of those to whom much is given, much is required. I leave you with a story about a young man who came to my office, students, and he said, I've just come back from Russia. I'm fluent in Russian. Had graduated, had been a junior in his junior year in Russian. And I'm thinking, my God, he's fluent in Russian, and he's African-American, big guy. And I said, what do your parents do? And he said, Doc, I never wanted to tell you this, but I am a ward of the state. And I thought for a minute, my God, he's telling me he doesn't have his parents. I said, what happened? And all of a sudden, as tears came down his face, he said, my daddy became hooked when I was 12 and left us. By the time I was 13, my mama was hooked, and she could no longer love me. And she left me in a crack house. Imagine what happens to a child, he said, left to fend for himself in a crack house. He said, but fortunately, after some months, the social worker got me out of that, got me into a group home on Liberty Road. And one of my teachers told me, if you want to get out of this situation, 2 things you must do. First, you must hold on to your faith and pray. Just say, God, help me. And second, you must learn to read well and to study. And you can, believe it or not, see doors open for you. And he took her advice, came home every day, kept praying and studying. He said, Doc, all I did was pray and study. And it was amazing. He got to UMBC, didn't have the money to live on campus. Some days, he said, he would hide in the library because he didn't have the money to get back to his group home. You know, while most freshmen and sophomores live on campus, he did not have the money. And then he said, some days I was so hungry with no money, I would go and get the clean part of the trash can without people seeing it. I learned how to look for something that was clean that somebody had left. And by this time, he's crying, and old men cry fast. You know that. And I'm just thinking, it never occurred to me on my middle-class campus that one of my children would not have food and would have to do that because he didn't know where to go. And I said, who's going to be at your graduation for you, your commencement? He said, I have nobody. I said, you don't know where any of your family members are? He said, Doc, I worry about letting them know where I am because I'm scared I'm going to end up like my mama and daddy. So I stay away. He said, sometimes, though, I will hide and find somebody of kin and just not let them see me because I just need to see somebody like that. And amazingly, at commencement, it was as if my deceased mama was talking in my ear. She said, get up and say something about this child. He's alone. And I did. I got up and I said, all of you, and students, you know this, all of you know how important your families are and your friends, and your College Success Foundation is another family for you. I said, but one of us is here today by himself, and I want you to let him know how much we care. And when I called his name, there was a gasp in the room because, you see, this young man had listened to everybody else's stories, had elevated all the other people, never told people how he had come out of hell to be there, kept it to himself. We never know what another young person has gone through. When we look into somebody's face, remember there is strength there, that we must do what the College Success Foundation, there is strength in every one of these children, just getting up in the morning and going to school and then having the remarkable courage to want to be an achiever says that they have that strength on the inside that we must help them pull out. And all of a sudden, the whole room was filled with applause, standing ovation for this child, for this 22-year-old black man. And they all said, we love you so much. And he came up and he said, Doc, I just don't know how I'll ever forget today. I'll always. He went on to Princeton, got a degree in international studies, works for the State Department, helping poor children all over the world. If he can do all of that, without having a college success foundation or somebody, a mama or grandmama or somebody. Imagine how much more we can do helping to connect with families and children to push them on to go to the next level. Washington, D.C., College Success Foundation. I challenge you to watch your thoughts. They become your words. Watch your words. They become your actions. Watch your actions. They become your habits. Watch your habits. They become your character. I tell my students your character has everything to do with who you are when your mama's not there. Then your core comes out. So thoughts become words, words become actions, actions become habits, habits become character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny, dreams, and values. Washington, you are so special, and you can be even better. Thank you all very much.